applause. Woo. Thank you, Deborah. How are you guys? Well, so today I thought of doing things a little differently, if it's all right with you guys. So it's a bit like a fireside chat. On some of the things, I realized that I have these side conversations, as Deborah said, often with some of you, and then I hear some of that same issue, challenge, or revelation somebody else is grappling with, and then you haven't had the opportunity to benefit from that. So I'm going to take a couple of things which seem to recur and see whether I can submit some ideas to you for your consideration, and we take it from there. Yeah? So, as a body, we've been on this quest that what the world calls signs, wonders, miracles actually become the norm. That's how Jesus walked this earth, right? These things were, he was a problem solver. He just saw an issue. Last time I was talking to you guys about the wedding at Cana, and he saw a problem, very practical problem, and he has a solution for it. That's how he worked, right the way through. Everything which the Bible calls, or the Word calls a miracle, was very ordinary in his stride. And that's what we can be. So 3 of the most powerful, in my view, the most powerful gifts we were given by God are enshrined in these 3 things. Free will, which I want to talk a little bit about. Today's an introduction to these 3 because they are huge topics, right? Free will, beholding, and the third is the 2 shall be one. It's a bit of that relational marriage paradigm we recently looked into, right? These 3 things are amazing when you actually unpack them, particularly the beholding one. I call behold really holding and becoming. You behold something where you fervently focus, gaze, that is at the very core of our creation, and I'll show you that. Then everything about that you become, and it unravels. There's no mystery. Everything that is mystical inside that opens out to you. So what that really says is that things we consider puzzling, even if you took the way we learn things, we acquire knowledge, even to pass an examination, a test, we would, in some ways, you're gazing at that source of knowledge, and then because we didn't fully understand the power we carry, we learn that maybe partially, not the deep understanding you can actually get if you really possessed it as a gift from God, and then we regurgitate that in an examination. But actually, did you know that you could access all of that from within your own access to the vast mind of Christ in you? So today, somebody, was it you were saying, the glory, we've talked about this, the glory within us, right? So we were talking last time about Colossians 1:27, about the Christ in you is the hope of whose glory? Whose hope? My hope. My hope is the Christ in you. And your hope is the Christ in me. Right? So we complete each other, we say. Right? Each of us complete the other. So this very powerful thing about the glory in each other is another thing I want to bring out. By the way, all of this, as I looked at Darnell, as I beheld him, I must say, I was inspired by those of you who came on Thursday, got this amazing word from the unique, the one and only Daniel. Because we had an opportunity to hear from the Christ in him. The Word made flesh through him. It was amazing. And he touched on both these things, beholding, and had a beautiful demonstration with Deborah here, which I shall not try to better because that was amazing. So they actually demonstrated beholding in a physical sense, right? So I was inspired to actually take that and talk a little bit more about this. So let's first jump into, I want to show you how powerful our mind is, because these are all elements of the way we were created in our mind, right? And so what better place to go than, guess where? Genesis 2. Yeah, Genesis 2. So I'm going to speak as these things come to my mind. Some of you can please add, because you have revelation in this area too. So let's jump into 2, and let's actually have it there, because it's important for you to see it in the Word. And let's have New King James. We have New King James, right? Yes. What are the versions we have?
New King James, the Passion,
and
ESV.
Amplified also?
Yeah, we have.
Okay, we'll do New King James for the moment. Julie, yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. See, you're imparting some amazing knowledge into her. Tell me when it's on there. Otherwise, I'll get my phone. Yeah, actually, I marked it on this, so it might be easier. So Genesis 2, guys, you remember, at the beginning of 2, God says he was, in Genesis 1, making all these things in his imagination, and he calls that works. And then he talks about at the very beginning that he's putting himself into this position of rest. Very interesting, right? So it begins 2, where everything will be manifested into the earth realm, brought down into the earth realm. He says he first is putting himself into rest, right? In Genesis 2:2 and 2:3. Right. And then he creates the first thing, which is in manifested form, mist and rain. By the way, just a side note, this is not part of what I was going to say, but a side note is this interesting thing you see just there demonstrated, that the mist goes up and the rain comes down. So when things go up, they reconcile and become one. So the mist went up, the water went up in a rainbow, and with the clouds becomes one. And then the clouds move to where the rain is needed. That's in the current form. In Genesis 2, of course, it rained to the whole earth, it says, right? But then it separates as it comes down. So this cycle, and I will show that because Chastity helped me to get a lovely set of 3 or 4 slides, not today, but a separate day. I will show you this whole thing about ascending, descending, and how when you go up, you reconcile, down, you separate, which is our mandate on earth. But let's keep progressing. So you have Genesis 2:7 then, when man is created. Now, that Genesis 2:7, I say this is my submission to you guys, is man is created there in his body and in his soul. Just in 2:7. And the rest of the many verses from that point all the way to 16, I would say, right? Up to 16 or 17 is all about man's mind. How he begins to form and program for the first time the mind of man. Why is that? Why such a level of detail? Because it is where everything forms, happens, and all our creation, all our creativity or co-creation with God begins in this realm, just like he demonstrated in Genesis 1. In the mind. What did I say?
You just said realm.
Oh, okay. In the mind. And the three parts of the mind I will just open out and show you here of thoughts, of emotions, and the will. And why I'm doing this is then you will see the first time of how free will of man was activated. And it'll give you a revelation there. A revelation you might not actually even fully understand today. But as time progresses, it'll unpack inside your spirit. Just believe it, receive it, and it'll do that. So let's just jump into these verses, because I want to just open them up, and as we go, you will see. So I want to start with 2:8. So in 2:8, we don't still have it? We do? Okay. Okay, that's great. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man who he had formed. So remember I said, the man in body and soul is formed, and he has brought himself at the beginning into rest, and he's taking man now, and he's putting him in this verse into rest. In Eden, the realm of Eden, in rest and in delight. So he's before anything else, he's taking man into a position of rest and in delight, in the realm of delight, the realm of Eden. Right? This is very important. So get that in. Right. Then we go to 2:9. Right? 2:9. Now 2:9, it talks about trees. And these trees, except two, are all pleasant, and they are also delightful. They are in delight, if you'd like. And all these trees, I likened in the spiritual, mystical way to your thoughts. So he's creating the flow of thoughts into you. And at this point, they're all wonderful, delightful, pleasant thoughts. Okay? Now, because everything was created in Genesis 1, which has both the delightful things, but also have to have their opposite, because that's the sum total, universal set of everything. So we have a tree of polarized or opposites as well, good and bad, high and low, right? Which is called the knowledge of good and evil. But it's basically a tree of all the polar opposites. That's there too. And then there's the tree of life. So another three things are created in this particular verse. But the important thing is, at this point, did God, having created it, tell man, okay, don't eat from this particular tree? No, he didn't. I want you to know that. I want you to underline that in your mind, so that you note that at this point, he did not tell man, do not eat from this tree. And there's a good reason in my view. That is because his emotions and his will were not formed. So these are just random thoughts. And his emotions are coming in the next. Now look at Genesis 10, 10 to 14. So Genesis 10 to 14 is about water. Now, many of you know this, that water represents emotion. So it says that a river, which starts from Eden, though it's to water Eden, it starts from Eden, and this river then therefore is also in a state of rest. It is also from the realm of Eden as it begins, at the head, the river head. Now then it parts into four rivers. Now I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in the four, but I will submit to you that these are, and if you read science journals, you will see broad four categories of emotions. Man's state or feelings are divided into four major emotional states. So one is joy, one is sadness, one is fear, and one is, what did I not say? Fear, anger. Now, some then subdivide that into, I've seen 5, I've seen 6, I have seen 7. All of these are basically subsets, if you look at a whole circle of sub-emotions which lie between these four in a spatial diagram. Right? You can sort of basically subcategorize it. But the four basic emotions are these. And these four rivers, obviously the first one, which has the power to create, it says valuable metals, gems, gold, and all of that, we could surmise was probably joy. A state of joy was able to create what is valuable. Assyria, for example, which is symbolic in those days of the enemies. So it could connote fear. And you could start to sort of see how each of these, one is gushing, the Tigris or Hikadel in Hebrew, that would be a rushing, gushing river, anger. So you could start to piece this together, but that's a whole separate thing and not really where I'm going today. So I don't want to get into that, but we will. We will, as a fam, look at these also, because I think this is a very interesting area to understand that part of our emotional being and how emotions are so critical to create. And how do you foster, how do you nurture, how do you focus the right emotions to bring about the kinds of outcomes and creation we want and alchemize and change situations as Jesus did on earth, right? So I'm going to do one with various signs and wonders in the Bible to exemplify how he used each of these emotions to actually produce. And it gives us a great example of how to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, examples from our own life and
producing for your life, not just signs and wonders.
yeah, but I'm saying signs and wonders are norm. That's where we are going with this. We want to practice in small ways, and then it becomes in big ways. As a family, when we start to practice, you'll start to see this become from extraordinary to ordinary. That's theurgy. And Pete was reminding me that we, as a family, need more and more the theurgy. The theology is great. That opens your mind. Then you're able to behold these things. But then, from that, you want to actually get into practice, right? But as I said, today is an intro, so the foundation is laid, and then we can jump into each of these in more detail. So, where were we? So then the emotions were formed, and now let's go into 15, right? So you can see the progression, right? Now the emotions are formed. Now the thoughts are there, the field. The field to sow these thoughts are there, right? Man, at this point, isn't entangling with any of these thoughts. He hasn't got all the parts to do that, to get triggered as we now do, right? He's just only acquired the emotions, which often are the initial source of trigger, right? So the thoughts are there in the field, man's field, and he's now got his emotions. And now let's look at 15, right? What does 15 say? My phone has gone off. Okay. Yeah. So, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden. Now, from the garden, because he is now fully incarnated with the realm of Eden, when he is put into the garden becomes the Garden of Eden. Note, the previous garden wasn't called Garden of Eden. It says in Eden, in the realm of Eden. Now, because now he's beginning to influence the creation around him. Right? So he is in a position now, he is incarnated with the realm of Eden. Now, wherever he goes, he carries Eden with him. He carries delight. He imparts delight to creation around him. Right? And therefore, the garden is now become the Garden of Eden. Do you guys get it? Okay. So in 15, the garden becomes the Garden of Eden. And in 16, the Lord God commanded. Now, here's the first time a commandment is coming. Because I would argue that, and some people, and I have had this argument with some of you, so I'm just bringing it out so that all of you share my thinking of it. I might change my thinking, but right now my thinking is, in Genesis 1:28, when he commanded, I use the word command, so some of you use the word command. I'm not saying he commanded man to be fruitful, to multiply, and subdue, fill and subdue and govern the earth. He did not command them. He didn't command man there. You read it carefully. It says, be. So you were made, your very essence was to increase, to multiply, to fill, subdue, and to govern the earth. This is who you are. It's in your DNA. It is, you can't help it. It is not about free will. It's who you are. You can't help it. Wherever you go, you are able to do this, you are this. Whereas here is the formation of free will. How do I now? I want to unravel this to you guys. This is a profound revelation, if you get it. So you wouldn't know you had something until I put a demand on it or a guardrail on it. So at this point, man does have free will, but he won't know until somebody says, you can't do something. Do you get it? If God just carried on doing the rest of what happens in Genesis 2, man still has free will, but he'll never know because there is nothing he cannot do. You need to tell somebody, put a guardrail and say, you cannot do this, or you shouldn't do this. Not cannot, you shouldn't do this. When you say you shouldn't do it, suddenly there is a guardrail from all the things his free will can do, but this. So it activates the free will in you. So this is the point. It's very important to get this. This is the point where man's free will was activated. Genesis 2:16. It's a very, very cool, I mean, just see the way God created us and fashioned us. And so at this point, now he understands, he's beginning to get a full comprehension of what freedoms, liberties he has. All but this. Right? That's why it's a free will. So he can eat that too. But that guardrail, can we say, triggers or enlivens the power of free will. Otherwise, he would have never fully understood, wow, what I have in me. It's almost like some of us now not fully understanding the power. As I said, it's one of the most powerful gifts mankind has. Now, other beings, sentient beings, like our pets, our animals, our pets in particular, because a wild animal, when you bring into your habitat, they can learn to some extent free will from you. So they begin to know how to love, right? So from being in the wild, where they are essentially in algorithm, meaning they are set in just like the other things into us patterns and cycles. They will eat, they will procreate, they will do the things in cycles. We can cause some interruption to that, those patterns and cycles, because again of the power of influence we carry. Right? We bring them into our habitat, they start to learn. Yes, God ways. Sorry?
The guardrail of bringing them into your life.
Yes, that's a nice point, Pete. That they learn the free will way of man. Yeah. So all sentient beings, you could argue, can to some extent have an understanding of free will imparted from man. Now that gives you a good entree, a segue into embodiment and this concept of behold, right? So we skipped a particular very important verse here, Genesis 15. Genesis 2:15. Genesis 2:15 was essentially the purpose, the mandate of man on earth. What does it say? To tend and keep. Other versions talk about watch and keep. So I'm using the word watch. The watch part is this behold part. That you gaze and you glorify. See, I again spoken here before, but some of you may not have been there, so let me explain. These two things we were to do in the garden, on the earth. Tend and keep, or watch and glorify. Watching is this gazing with intent. So now you have these thoughts in your field, you have emotions to engage, and you can actually act and make things happen because you have now the will. All three parts of your mind are now formed, right? So you're now a full triune being at this point. And your mandate is not to get entangled in every thought like Eve did in the garden with this fruit she was told not to eat. You are judicious. You don't get involved in entangled in every thought in the field. You have this ability to choose. And then when you behold a thought, you're able to understand it fully. Now this goes to then what John 14:6 talks about, his way, the Lord's way. And that leads to the truth because you are judicious. You have full understanding with what you behold. Meaning, it's not based on evidence which man usually has in a court of law, as I say, where you have written submissions. We see everything in something I behold. So if I behold Jyoti, I will know everything. You have, like in the court of Solomon, you have come to me with a problem, and I behold you. I turn my attention to you. And there is a fervency in the way I'm engaging. And as I behold you, you don't need to say anything. You don't need to utter a word. I know everything through revelation. Because I become one with you. Now, that becoming one with you, that concept, I submit to you, is what is at the end of Genesis 2. It is given a marriage paradigm between Adam and Eve. About two shall become one. Man shall leave his father, his mother. Yeah, we can put that up as well, guys. Verse, what's that? 224. Yeah, you can put that up. So there you're introduced, or man is introduced to a concept of, through a marriage paradigm, but it applies to every relationship from that point on. Because at that point you're not referring to all the body, this body. But in this body, we can become, two shall be one with anybody. That's how the body was able to be so intertwined and support and be a blessing. And this concept of glory in you, which we just referred to earlier, which is also there in John 1:9 and 1:4, where he is life, meaning Jesus, and that life was the light of men. So the light which we carry, the glory which we carry, is what we're talking about here, where we connect with each other in that glory by beholding each other, right? And so he's introduced to that in this part where the two shall be one. So we're given this ability, guys, which you may not have realized, this powerful ability to behold anything, anybody and anything. I would submit, anything. Like when Jesus stilled the wind. He became one with the wind. The disciples were panicking in the boat, thinking the storm was going to capsize the boat. You remember that story, right? But what does he do? He wakes up and he says, be still, because he's one with the wind. It's not an adversary. It's not an enemy. So something horrible comes to bite you. They're part of creation. They're submitted to you. Or another way of looking at it is that they don't see you as an outsider. You're part of them. So this, if once you start to, that's why I said, take this in, let it ruminate inside you, so that the full revelation would come to you that nothing is an adversary in this world. You can be one with them if you behold them and they don't see you as an outsider. You can use it professionally, in business, in your professional settings, where you're one with the one who looks like either competition or you're in an interview situation. Again, you can become one. I mean, this is an amazing thing. As the revelation comes to you, because it is inside you, it will tell you how to do this. I don't need to tell you how to do it. You will start to practice this, and it'll come through from within you. I'm just showing you that this was how you were put together by God, right? That these are things you already have. The free will, the way to, in love, to engage with one another. And it is actually, you can, even a minor experiment can show you this, right? If you move your attention, true attention, the thing is we are very busy people and we are very cursory, about our relationships. You know, even like you could catch yourself at home. I bet you the two of you who love each other immensely, but you're probably talking to Deborah while you're doing a text. I know I do. We are so busy, we're unable to behold. That's the way life has turned out. But in the garden, in rest, in Eden, in delight, you were having time to each thought rushing past you. You took your time. You engaged with what you wanted. You engaged with what needs subduing, what needs filling, what needs increase, what needs multiplying. You're able to do that. And you did that not from a triggered place. You were never a victim. You were not controlled. You were able to do this with your free will. And it's such an empowering. Can you see this, guys? This has nothing to do with somebody else. It's not dependent on any person around you doing something, preparing something, all in your court. You are 100% empowered. That's how we were made. It is such a powerful thing, and you know these. So you need to kind of, like I said, let this simmer, and then as you do that, as you believe that this is how you are, then you will start to see the power of this come inside, from inside you. Behold a few things today. Right? Just focus on something and start to see. I know this because I've practiced this. Even the word. If I want any revelation, now I'm busy on so many. Like this week has been crazy for me because it's the year end at the World Bank and I have 26 deliverables across various countries and it's a super busy time. But moment I knew I'm speaking today, I look at the word, you behold it, and it unpacks. Try it. So, I mean, you could try it with inanimate things as well. You want to understand how this camera works. You know, just see the power. You just behold it and start to wait. You don't have to read the instruction manual of this. I'm challenging you guys. You suddenly think, wow, I know that? Because all knowledge, everything out there is accessible when you behold. I know some of you probably thinking, nah, not for me, but try it. Try it with small things and then it'll start to build your muscles in this area, right? Excellent. So that's really how I wanted to keep the introduction. I don't know whether you want to ask a question or two, or
I just want to reiterate, I'd never seen it before, Manju, and so I just wanted to reiterate it for everybody because I think it's so powerful, that when God said, be fruitful and multiply, really what he said before that is he blessed them, yes. And he said, be, like this will be your nature. Yes. Be this way, yes. Not as a command, exactly. But as an impartation into their very being. He blessed them and said, this is how you will be. You are made to multiply, tend, guard, flourish. And I just love that insight. And I also just wanted to say that, crazy as it sounds, I have practiced that a little bit. The beholding, you're talking about inanimate objects, a tree, a spoon. And when you behold, you're beholding through the eyes and the heart of the one who made them. So it's not just a looking. And it sounds really crazy, but for those few moments, I could impart my free will very briefly so that the spoon would bend and worship with me or the tree would dance with me. And it's just a very, I know this sounds really crazy to a lot of people, okay. But you know, our God is a very mystical kind of a being. And I don't feel like I'm that way like all the time. But I really have practiced it a little bit. And it is really quite amazing. It's not becoming one with who they are only, but it's making them aware that the one who is beholding them is the one who created them, the I am in us. And that's what really makes the difference.
Yes, that's beautiful. Great addition. And remind me another day to talk about Yod, which is the Hebrew consonant or letter, which is in every single Hebrew word. It's at the beginning and at the end, and it is the Hebrew, mystical Hebrews believe that this is the God part in everything, right? And why I said that was when Deborah was talking. So Yod He Vav He comes from Yod. So even in his name, his tetragrammaton. He's here. His name has that Yod in it, and so Yod is the Hebrew words or letters have numbers attached to them. So Yod is number 10, the number of completion, and there are 10 verses of the creation of the human mind from verse 8 to 17. They're all interwoven. These are amazing, things which all come together. And when we do that, when we talk a little more about the Yod and what it is, the letter, it's amazing. You'll see these interconnections, and we'll do that another day because that will take another half an hour. Anybody else wants to add? Because you may have either, like Deborah, an experience of trying this out. Any one of the three. The two shall be one. Peter, and then Mara.
Yeah, Mara can go first.
That's fine.
I just have a question. So you're saying that oneness, to be oneness with someone, like Eve, when she get that negativity to get the apple, how could she be like a human being in us? How could you be oneness with that person when the negative coming to you? I just could not get it.
So, by the way, my version is that it was the man's fault. And, fault is not a really nice word to use, but it was the man not doing his part that got Eve into that situation. I'll tell you why. So this is good context to answering your question. So in this verse we just looked at about how Eve was created. If you can go to that, I think it's 22, right? Eve was created in 2:22, I think. Man in 2:7, Eve in 2:22. So if you go to that, you will see Eve is taken out of man, the body man, and when Adam, because Adam was in those few verses, co-creating and naming things with God, right? So how does he describe Eve? Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. So Eve at that stage is the body man, if you want to call it. So she needs Adam, who had already now been imparted all the wonderful things we've been talking about. Two shall be one, because Genesis 2 finishes, two shall be one. Now it was his job to manifest, incarnate Eve fully. You get it? This is the MH version. Not that I've, maybe others won't subscribe to it, but my revelation is that, you want to add something. Yeah. So my revelation is that Eve, if Adam fully incarnated Eve before this incident, then she would have had the discernment how to entangle. You did not entangle in submission to the creation. You were a boss. You were the governor. What she did was she traded God's wisdom to the creation she was supposed to govern, their wisdom. Right? So, and I believe if she had, by the way, wisdom also I call if you kind of break it, wisdom is also the kingdom of God. Wisdom. The wisdom is the wiseness of the kingdom, right? Wiseness of the kingdom. But at that stage, she didn't have the wiseness of the kingdom. And the guy should have done his bit and got her into that place and protected her, covered her. So anyway, that's my version.
My submission would be a little bit different. I like that question because I feel like it's very relevant. You know, as we look around, as we walk through the world, we see that there's things that you may want to engage with in a very intimate way, and there's things that you may want to engage with or not engage with. And so I think, you know, we could apply the principle that yes, I'm meant to have dominion over everything, and then religiously go and try and have dominion over literally everything we encounter. And to me, that wouldn't be wisdom, right? Wisdom is knowing where to apply my influence. Wisdom is knowing who I'm called to, what I'm called to. So I think it really is about if that's your gut saying, oh, this person, you know, maybe wouldn't be a good person to kind of partner with in that way. In some cases, you may need to have that authority if that person is in your life and you want a different outcome, right? Let's say it's a negative situation with your boss. You want your boss and you to have a different relationship. You may want to intentionally engage in a certain way so that they start to mirror you instead of it just being, you know, in their pattern and cycle. So I think that's a good example. But for example, if there's a friendship where it's kind of toxic and you always feel like, you know, when you're with this friend, you feel put down, or you feel belittled, something like that, then that may be a thing where you choose not to try and change it. You know, that's the wisdom. It's just knowing where to apply your influence. And it's free will. It's free will. There's no religious thing about, oh, I have to change this situation just because I could. Just because you have the potential ability to do something doesn't mean you should all the time. So I think should is not a law thing, but it is a free will and a choice thing. Okay.
I totally agree, and I hope I didn't give you the impression that just because you have free will, you go changing. That's why I said you entangle with what you need to entangle, and that is informed by God's wisdom, right? God's wisdom, and so I totally agree with Pete, and I'm glad you brought that out, Pete, because I think I said this before, but let me repeat it because it's now very applicable to what has been asked. What is wisdom? So I said it's the will of the kingdom. That's one way to unpack it. Will of God. In other words, will of God, will of the kingdom. But how do you get it? So we carry him in us. That's the short answer. But unpacking it a little further, the mechanics of how it happens is like this. One of us imparts a word, which is uniquely in this case, we all allow you to be the unique you. You know, we don't want you to become somebody else. You're the unique you. So these data points come to you, and hopefully, some of us at least make the data a little more organized, so it becomes knowledge, comes to you as knowledge, and then the knowledge sits and ruminates and becomes understanding inside you, in your spirit. Now, do you, like Peter rightly said, you don't go apply just because you have then the understanding. You don't just go and willy-nilly apply that. So wisdom is taking that, which happens, if you like, in chronos, but when it becomes kairos, in other words, it's outside time and space. It has taken a lot more than what I might have today imparted to you. It has gone outside time and space inside your spirit and become, in kairos realm, the full maturity of that. Then you're able to then take that and apply it at the right time, the right thing at the right time. That is wisdom. Right? So it's good to understand also how the mechanics of that work. So it is indeed something which comes like what Solomon had. I mean, he asked for that one thing, and he had that. But we all have the ability of Solomon because of the Christ in us, the Yod in us. Yeah. Any other? We still have a few minutes. Yeah, one more thing.
I might close this out today, but I think the coolest thing for me today was about free will and the ability to impart free will, right? And I love what Deborah said as well. But think about it. Think about everything in the world, everything in the created universe is reacting out of its instinct, right? Even the sun, is like it's an algorithm. It's predictable, and the only time that aspect of creation gets to choose is when it begins to interact with you. If you give it a different choice than the one it's never had, it's always just done what it's done. But if I come to, like Deborah was saying, a spoon, or sometimes, I'll just sit and I'll think, with the birds, and I'm like, I'll imagine what it would be like to be the bird coming toward me, and the bird might come toward me. I gave that bird a choice to align with my will and my intention. That sounds a little strange, but I'm just communing with creation, right? So if you think about that and you expand it to not silly things, not just like hanging out with a bird on your deck, but instead, your business, money, right? Opportunities, friendships, the kind of influence, relationships, you can begin to understand that creation is waiting and even groaning for a choice. Is groaning to be delivered from futility, which is just going around in its pattern and cycle over and over again. And you have the power to do that. And I think that's amazing. So I just wanted to say that. That's really what blessed me today.
Well, thank you, Peter. You see the beauty of having people get up and add to what, and today's fireside was, well, you want to make one more?
Just connecting about what you talked about, the example of beholding is, again, in Genesis, where Jacob did with the sheep. So I don't know if you want to expand on that. Definitely.
Did you guys know that beholding is mentioned 1,527 times in the Bible? And we're talking about it for the first time here in the house. So there's a lot more talking to do about beholding, because it's a very, very special, it has a lot to unpack. I want to just say one more thing, and we're going to finish with this. Min said, okay, one more thing. She always says, I'm the one more thing guy. By the way. No, I for those of you who are in software, like I see Steve there and others, man is inspired constantly by what I think is in the Word, but they don't know. They have nothing to be. I mean, most of the tech industry guys are not believers, but you can see it's just inside them, like we said. It's who they are. And if you take the three-tier architecture of software, which is you have this, the hardware, which is, in my analogy, the bodysuit, right? So you can see they were inspired by who we are. The bodysuit is the hardware, and the actual operating system is our, if you like, our general, what do you call, what's the word? The operating system is how we are, the brain and the way we are wired to function. And then the specific software, the application you're running, is in fact this external incarnations you get. I mean, you could believe in God, and then His Spirit and the things He wills is what you're running inside you. You could embody, and something else could embody you, and you'll be running some other software, right? And you get these kinds of outcomes we had in the mall the other day, or in a school. So this, you can see how man is inspired by the 3T architecture of how we were put together. That 3 comes up over and over again in many, many things. I just want to mention that because, some of you, when you're asking these questions, I sort of got that.